Next, let's welcome Jessica Hofmann, Head of Compliance Central Eastern Europe and Turkey at Siemens Healthineers. Since 2012, she has worked in several compliance roles at Siemens in Germany and Austria. She holds a Magister degree in German Studies, Philosophy of Science and Logic from University Leipzig, and studied Philosophy and Economics at University Bayreuth. Hofmann believes that compliance and ethics require tough decisions to be made every day, and that it's important to keep the inner compass calibrated. She says, "My calibration is a quote from the doctor. Never cruel or cowardly. Never give up. Never give in."
Hello, my name is Jessica Hofmann. I'm the Compliance Officer for Central Eastern Europe and Central Asia at Siemens Healthineers. That zone includes actually both the Ukraine and Russia. Siemens Healthineers does have legal entities in both the Ukraine and Russia. And also I have Ukrainians and Russians on my team. So you can imagine that in the past couple of months we had some awkward moments and also some challenging discussions in the company. And those challenging discussions, they are continuing. And with this current situation, with this crisis, it puts the value sets of companies to the test. What I have seen during internal discussions and also during external discussions is that many companies are already dealing with corruption, with money laundering issues. They have policies in place, they have frameworks in place, they have programs that look at to prevent and to detect misconduct. But what is rather new with many companies is actually the whole realm of ethics. And you hear that buzzword a lot, to have ethical conduct, to be ethical. But when you ask questions, when you ask people, what does that actually mean for you? Or what does that mean in a business context? It gets a little bit blurry. So what I often hear as a response, what is ethics for you? It is doing what is right. That sounds rather trivial, but it's actually quite loaded. Because this doing what's right gets you down the rabbit hole of good versus evil, right versus wrong. So when you look at the ethical realm on business ethics, what is currently going on, or what's a hot topic besides sustainability, is actually human rights and armed conflicts. And armed conflicts is an umbrella term. If you go by international law, they have a differentiation into a war of aggression and into a civil war. And this differentiation might be quite insightful for the discussion that we are having here. And when you look at international law and to wars that have been illegal, then there is not that much in the recent past that we have. In 2018 and 2019, the military attacks or the military actions of Turkey in Syria, they might qualify to be illegal wars. But when you look at what happened, neither the UN nor the European Union could agree on measures, on any sanctions, on what to do. And then, of course, there is the war of Russia and Ukraine at the moment. So there is not much precedent to go on in what a company should actually do right now. This is something new. And what I brought you here today is a map about ongoing armed conflicts in the world. And this shows all the death related to combat in the world. The darker the color, the more death. And if you look at this map, there is actually a lot of combat-related death going on in the world right now. Now, as a company, do you have such a map? Do you do business in those red or yellow areas? Do you invest in those areas? Do you invest or do you do business in areas where you have human rights violations? Do you have an ethics or a human rights assessment if you go in that areas? Now you might wonder, why does my company actually have or should have something like that? Well, at the moment there is a loud crowd, and maybe we already have a critical mass already at the moment. And they are voicing their opinions. They are speaking up. They go to the social media, they go to the streets and openly protest. They want companies to care. And those voices, they are not new. They are around for many, many decades. But I've never heard that many, and I never heard them that loud. And just as a few examples, I brought here one. This is what I call the shaming list of the Yale School of Management. And they look at companies that are active in Russia. And they differentiate between companies that are withdrawing from the market entirely and companies that are digging in. And then they have several shades in between. And also there was the German Minister of Economics who did not prolong an investment guarantee for a company for the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region because of concerns regarding human rights violations. So you see, there is awareness, there is change. And what I recommend to companies is do not let this good crisis go to waste. Now, what I learned in discussions with the business about ethics and about ethical dilemma is that ethics or the dilemma is really hard to grasp for them. And as we heard just in the previous speech is you have to deal with people that might have a moral superiority bias. They think that they are the most ethical and that they would only always take ethical decisions. And if you only take always ethical decisions, you could never be faced with an ethical dilemma, obviously. However, people also instinctively go to the good, where there's the wrong, and the right and the evil, but without much reflection what that actually means in a business context. So that is why I do not talk about ethical dilemmas, but I talk about life plans with the people. And when you have a life plan, you have a decision maker or a group of decision makers. And they have to choose between alternatives. And at least one of those alternatives is affecting another individual and the life plan of that individual. And the life plan can basically be anything. It can be good health, can be leading a good life, can be I want to travel the world, I want to have a career, whatever that might be. And now you have those decision makers. They take a decision between alternatives, and this individual is affected by it. This individual has not given his or her consent, or even expressly said, I don't want this. But the life plan is affected. Whenever you see such a scenario, then you are facing an ethical dilemma. And to top this up a little bit more, we can also have a dirty hands dilemma. And in a dirty hands dilemma, I usually do that in internal trainings, and I ask the people to raise their hands who is against torture. Usually all the hands shoot up, some rather quickly, some a little bit more slowly, but usually all hands go up. Everyone is against torture. Now imagine, your loved one who was abducted, while the kidnapper is already in custody and being interrogated. He is happily talking about that he buried your loved one alive and has only 1 hour to live. He is not telling you where, or he's not telling the police where. So I repeat the question, who would resort to torture? And then again, a lot of hands go up. Some shoot up, and some rather reluctantly, some stay down. So for those people who keep their hands down, they stick to their values and let the evil, in quotation marks, play out. Those who are willing to throw their personal beliefs overboard, in this case torture is bad, they want to potentially save a loved one by not sticking to their values. If you have such a situation, this is a dirty hands dilemma. And staying in Russia or leaving Russia is a dirty hands dilemma. And actually, whatever you choose, you lose in those aspects. So the war of Russia against the Ukraine has the potential to change the rules of the game. Mainly because everyone is somehow affected. Everyone in Europe. There is high energy prices. There is the inflation. there's a lot of people who have colleagues, friends, or family in one of those countries. So everyone is affected. And the question that all the companies who are active in Russia has to ask themselves, do I stay or should I go? No, this question is not that trivial, but I hope that in this forum it is consensus that Russia is leading an unprovoked attack against the sovereign state of the Ukraine. The proclamation of annexation doesn't change that. The roles of victim and of perpetrator are pretty clear in this scenario. In the beginning, there was a very, very heated debate. Right and wrong was thrown around. And staying in Russia was pretty much said to be financing a war. And the debate has cooled down by now, but it needs to continue. It needs to be more level-headed. And there are still crowds that shouting that they want to isolate Russia or that companies need to withdraw from the market. But this is actually changing the life plans of people. So on February 24th, and I'm never going to forget that date, because I was about to call a person in the Ukraine and offer her a job. I didn't do it that day. And everyone thought in the beginning that war would be over in just a few weeks. And personally, I never thought that this could ever happen or would ever happen. I was in Kiev just in the beginning of February, and some colleagues and friends thought me nuts to even go there, but I didn't believe that a war could happen. Well, now the war's ongoing for nearly 8 months now. We don't know how long it's going to last. It can be over in 2 weeks. It can last for the next 5 or 10 years. So whatever decision a company takes, it is for the long run. And also, it is under a lot of uncertainty. And now, just last week, by the end of last week, the new EU sanctions package was released. And I do not have an opinion yet about that one. But when I look at the sanctions that are already in place, they are comparatively mild. And the outlook on the Russian economy is actually not as bad as it was predicted or as it was hoped for. The sanctions are very, very slowly sinking in. And there was a study in 2015 about the US and UN sanctions, and that study said that the GDP of sanctioned countries drops by about 3% points per year. In the long haul, it's 25.5% over a period of 10 years. And they also had a look at the success rate of sanctions. And the success rate is about 4%. And success means a change in the regime. The study admits that it's really difficult to pinpoint the actual cause for a regime change, but 4% is what they came up with. Also, there was no evidence that the severity of sanctions has any proportion to the success rate of the sanctions. So this is a tricky one. And when you look at the moment, the sanctions prohibit only certain business, not business in total. So decision to stay or to go is left to competing companies. And by law, those companies are not allowed to agree on issues. And so this would actually be collusion. So it's a gamble for the companies. If I withdraw from the market, will the others follow? Will my competitors follow? Or will they use the vacuum and increase their market share? What are my shareholders saying if I stay or if I go? Now, let's assume that companies of an industry would withdraw from the Russian market. Would that have an effect on the outcome of the war? I don't know. I'm not a military expert, nor do I excel at game theory. But I hope that it would. Is it a likely scenario? Probably not. Does that mean that companies should just do business as they did before February? Absolutely not. And the war, the sooner it ends, the better. It would save lives. It would have a better outcome for the economy. But let's go back to the question of the business in Russia or no business in Russia and the life plans of people. Some Siemens brands are withdrawing from the market in Russia. This is the ones with the petrol-colored logo and the one with the purple-colored logo. They are withdrawing. Siemens Healthineers, we are the one with the orange logo. We are staying. We are still selling medical equipment and servicing medical equipment. What I see with the other brands that are ramping down is that people lose their jobs. Some people are transferred to other countries, others can't or won't leave, and there's always a personal story behind those. So for those people who are not transferred, their livelihood is at risk. And also a company has a duty to ensure the safety of employees. When we look at the current legislation in Russia, that is rather difficult. At the moment, the managing director can be held liable for disseminating messages that call the war a war. So what can you do as an international company? You can cut down your communication channels and create another bubble of ignorance for the employees in Russia, but that's about it. Now, if your company decides to actually stay in Russia, then there's a couple of things that you can look at as well, and that is the scale of doing business and your products. There's a wide range of gray between investing and withdrawal. We have contractual obligations. What happens if you do not go with those obligations? Is it an option to just provide service instead of new deals? An interesting fact, medical devices are not affected by the sanctions yet, but the spare parts are. So, what about the profit that you would do in Russia? Is it justifiable to keep the profit that you generate in Russia? Should you donate it? To whom? How much? I've did a couple of polls in our company, and there is no conclusion what is the right way to go. And your products, is your product essential? I think it's pretty easy to say that we can live without luxury products or with a couple of less consumer products. But what about food? What about medical devices? What about pharmaceuticals? Can there be a scale for those products as well? Is a chocolate bar essential? Is baby formula? Does it have to be the high-end machine? Does a surgery have to be minimally invasive? Is it justifiable to have a potentially worse outcome of an intervention? There is lots and lots of aspects to actually consider. And there is no one-size-fits-all answer. So for those who have expected from me a universal answer, I'm really, really sorry to disappoint. But what companies actually have to do is they have to have a reasoning and a justification for whatever they choose to do. Because they need to answer their employees, they need to answer their stakeholders, they need to answer their shareholders, and they need to answer the general public. And when your company reaches a decision, have a critical look at other areas of the world, where there is armed conflict, where there is violations, and compare the decision that you made for Russia with those other corners of the world. And how will your company decide in the future? I hope that companies will use this crisis. I hope that the general public and the shareholder will signal to the companies that they want companies to set up evaluation criteria and not only stay within a legal frame, but look at a broader picture, look at ethical considerations, look at sustainability, look at human rights, look at armed conflicts. And also, managers are not born ethical leaders, they are made. So what a company needs is to empower the managers and their employees to take good decisions, not only for the company, but also for the greater good. And companies need value sets that weather the storm. It doesn't help if a value set just works in the sunshiny weather. Management also needs a sparring partner. They need someone that points out the biases and someone that points out the blind spots. So I cannot answer your question whether you should stay or go in Russia or in any other critical area. And to end with the clash, if you go, there will be trouble, and if you stay, there will be double.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jess.